Welcome to Reformed Thinking. It's great to have you with us again.
Yeah, good to be back.
So today we're opening up our sources to try and get our minds around what Scripture demands of us on topic that I think for many of us, it sort of sits in a category of things we assume we have handled.
Things we assume we're doing correctly.
Right. We assume we're doing it correctly, but we might actually be neglecting some really central parts. We're talking about missions.
But not just the idea of missions, not just the going.
No, not at all. We're talking about the machinery behind it.
Yeah.
The sending, specifically the relationship between the local church and the missionary on the field.
It's a vital topic, and honestly, it's one of those areas where our ecclesiology, our doctrine of the church, really gets tested.
How so?
Well, we can have the Westminster Confession on our shelves, we can hold to a high view of Scripture in our pulpits, but if our actual mission strategy looks like we're just, outsourcing the Great Commission.
Outsourcing, that's the perfect word for it.
If we're outsourcing it to a third-party vendor, then we have a theological problem. A big one.
It makes sense, though, why we do it.
Yeah.
We live in a world of specialization, right? If my car breaks down, I don't try to fix it myself. I call a mechanic.
Sure.
If I need a website, I hire a developer.
Yeah.
And I think the default setting for many churches has become similar. We want to see people saved in country X, so let's find an agency to do that for us.
And the sources we're looking at today are going to challenge that mindset aggressively.
They certainly are. So, for you listening, we're looking at two main texts today. First is a chapter called Don't Hand Them Off by Mark Tatlock and Chris Burnett. It's in the book Biblical Missions: Principles, Priorities, and Practices.
And then to help us land the plane, get really practical, we're also pulling from Tom Pennington's work, Supporting Your Church's Missionaries.
The thesis that comes out of these is, it's provocative. It argues that while agencies do have a place, the local church has basically abdicated its throne.
Handed over the keys.
Yeah, we've handed over the keys to the spiritual supply line.
Yeah.
And the result is this huge disconnect that ends up hurting the missionary and actually weakening the church back home.
That is the absolute core of it. Missions is frontline ministry. I mean, it is spiritual warfare. And you cannot fight a war if your supply line is broken.
Or if you've delegated it to someone who doesn't really know the soldiers on the front.
Exactly. So the mission for this discussion, for us, is to reclaim that authority and that responsibility that belongs to the local church in the life of the missionary.
Okay, before we dive into the heavy theology of Acts 13, which is where we're going to spend a lot of our time, I want to set the stage with a story. It's an anecdote that Tatlock and Burnett bring up, and it just frames this whole conversation perfectly. It's the story of the rope holders.
Right. From the Particular Baptist Missionary Society, 1792. This is basically the birth of the modern missions movement.
So you've got these two key figures, Andrew Fuller and William Carey. Everyone knows William Carey.
Father of modern missions, the guy who went to India.
Yes. But the story goes that when they were all deliberating this huge undertaking, they're sitting around in Kettering, England, the task just seemed impossible. India was this massive, daunting pagan world.
And Fuller describes it using this analogy of a mine.
A deep, dark, unexplored mine.
Yeah. Imagine a pit that no one has ever gone down into. It's dark, it's dangerous, you have no idea if there's gold down there or if the air is poisonous.
Carey looks at the group and he says, I will go down. I will descend into the pit. But I will only go if you promise to hold the rope.
And that's the moment. Fuller and the others standing there at the mouth of that pit, they took an oath.
What was the oath?
They said that as long as they lived, they would never, ever let go of the rope.
That image, it just gives me chills every time I think about it. It completely changes the dynamic of missions.
It does.
The guy in the pit is doing the work, the digging, but his life, his very survival, depends entirely on the grip strength of the guys at the top.
If they get distracted, if their arms get tired, if they decide to just walk away and do something else,
he falls, or he's stranded.
And that's the analogy we need to keep in our heads for this whole deep dive. The whole premise of our sources today is that the local church is the rope holder.
Not the mission agency.
Not the agency. The agency might manufacture the rope. They might provide the pulley system. They might help you get a visa to even get to the mine. But the church holds the weight.
So if the church thinks, the agency has this covered, then they have, in effect.
They've let go of the rope, and when you let go of the rope, the miner is in serious trouble.
Okay, let's unpack this biblically then. This isn't just some nice sentimental story. It's grounded in how the New Testament church actually worked. And the source material takes us straight to Acts chapter 13.
Acts 13 is the pivot point. Up until this chapter in Acts, the focus has really been on Jerusalem and the dispersion from there, but now the camera shifts. It shifts to Antioch,
And Antioch becomes the launch pad.
the launch pad for global missions.
So let's look at the situation there. Acts 13, verses 1 to 3. It lists the leaders who are there. You have Barnabas, Simeon, who is called Niger, Lucius of Cyrene, Manaen, and Saul.
And you notice these are not just random church members.
No, these are the heavy hitters.
They are the prophets and teachers. That's a crucial observation the authors make. The church at Antioch had what you might call a deep bench. They had serious leadership.
And what are they doing? It says they are ministering to the Lord and fasting.
Notice the God-centeredness of that activity. They aren't in a conference room brainstorming a 5-year strategic plan.
Right. No whiteboards and SWOT analysis.
They're worshiping. And it's in that context, the context of worship, that the Holy Spirit speaks.
Set apart from me, Barnabas and Saul, for the work to which I have called them.
And you just have to pause there and think about who the Spirit asked for.
He asked for their best.
Their absolute best. Barnabas and Saul were pillars of that church. I think sometimes in the modern church, there's this subtle temptation to send the people who are, for lack of a better word, expendable.
Or maybe the people who are just really enthusiastic but don't quite fit into the local ministry structure.
Yes. Oh, you're really eager and you've got a lot of energy. Great, why don't you go to the mission field?
He's a bit of a loose cannon, so let's just aim him at another continent.
Precisely. But the Antioch model is the polar opposite of that. They sent their proven leaders. They sent the men who were already doing the work of ministry right there.
Tatlock and Burnett make that point very clearly. These men were already active, already ministering, before they were exported.
You don't export what you don't have. If a man isn't a disciple maker in his home city, putting him on an airplane doesn't magically turn him into one.
It turns him into a tourist with a support account.
That is a stinging but often true reality.
Okay, so this is where the source material draws a distinction that I think we need to clarify for you. It's the difference between the church and the parachurch.
A critical distinction.
We're not saying, and the authors are not saying, that missions agencies are bad.
No, not at all. But they are defining the lanes. They're defining the roles.
So what does parachurch even mean?
Well, para just means alongside. Parachurch organizations exist to come alongside the church. They exist to assist.
So they might handle logistics.
Right. They can help you navigate the red tape of international law, visas, specialized training, maybe language acquisition. That stuff is good, and it's necessary.
But the text argues that the agency must never, ever usurp the church's role.
And that's the problem that's been identified. Because churches often lack the logistical expertise. I mean, we don't know how to get a residence permit in a closed country. We tend to hand over the spiritual oversight right along with the logistical tasks.
We confuse the logistics with the calling.
Yeah.
We think, well, the agency accepted him into their program, so he must be qualified.
And that is the fundamental error. An agency sees a snapshot. They see an application form. They see a few references. They might do a weekend interview.
But who knows the candidate's actual character? Who knows how they handle a traffic jam or a difficult neighbor or a conflict in the church nursery?
The local church.
Only the local church.
Only the local church. The authors ask some really piercing questions for a church to consider. Is this person genuinely striving for holiness? How do they handle pressure? Are they trustworthy with money, with their time, with their word?
An agency just can't answer those questions.
Not in a meaningful way. Only the people who are living life alongside them, week in and week out, can answer that.
This brings us right to the topic of qualifications. Since we are coming from a Reformed perspective, we care a lot about church order, about biblical offices. And the source makes a very strong case that if a missionary is going out to plant churches, he needs to be a whole lot more than just willing.
He needs to be qualified. Biblically qualified. Specifically, he needs to meet the qualifications of an elder that you find in 1 Timothy 3 and Titus 1.
Let's walk through the logic of that. Why is that so non-negotiable?
Well, think about the job description. The missionary's primary task in a church planting context is to gather new believers, to disciple them, and then eventually to appoint elders who can lead that new church. How can a man appoint and train elders if he himself is not qualified to be one?
It's the blind leading the blind scenario. You can't reproduce what you are not.
You can't. And what if they're going in support roles? Maybe administration, logistics, medical work.
Then what's the standard?
They should meet the qualifications of a deacon. The point is, the standard for going to the nations should not be lower than the standard for serving in your local church.
If anything, it should be higher.
It should be higher because they are operating without the safety net of a mature church structure all around them. Sending an unqualified man to appoint elders is just a recipe for disaster.
So the church at Antioch, they've identified these men, they recognize the Spirit's call, then comes the actual sending process. And it's not just a farewell party with some cake in the fellowship hall.
No, it's a solemn, serious act. It involves fasting, prayer, and the laying on of hands.
I want to touch on that, the laying on of hands. In our tradition, we can sometimes get a little nervous about physical rituals, but this is clearly biblical, what's happening in that act.
It's a formal commissioning. It's an act of identification. The leadership of the church is publicly saying, we are identifying with you. Your work is our work. We are sending you as an extension of this body.
So it's an act of authority.
It's an act of authority and an act of blessing. It signifies that these men are not going as freelancers or independent contractors. They're going as authorized messengers of the church at Antioch.
Okay, so they have their first big missionary trek. But the relationship doesn't just stop there with a handshake at the door.
No, the rope is still attached.
Right. And this moves us into our second segment, which connects Acts 14 and the book of Philippians. The source calls this the tether of connection.
So you jump forward in the story to Acts 14, verses 26 to 28. Paul and Barnabas finish what we now call their first missionary journey. And where do they go?
They don't just, retire to a villa in Cyprus.
No, they go straight back to Antioch, back to the sending body.
And the text says they gathered the church together.
This is the very first missionary report. And you have to notice the content of that report. They declared all things that God had done with them.
Not what they had done.
No. It wasn't a slideshow of the scenery. It wasn't just a list of all their hardships, though there were certainly plenty of those. The focus was theological.
How so?
They highlighted how God had opened a door of faith to the Gentiles. The whole report was framed through the lens of God's sovereignty. It was soli Deo Gloria.
I love the phrasing that comes next. It says they spent not a little time with the disciples.
Not a little time.
That means a long time.
It does. They reintegrated. They didn't just pop in for a weekend service, grab a check, and then fly out again. They rejoined the actual life of the body.
That seems so crucial for the health of the missionary. They need to be remembered to the body, so to speak.
They need to be ministered to. They can't just be put on a pedestal and looked at as spiritual superheroes.
It seems like today the whole idea of furlough or home assignment, as we often call it now, it's just frantic.
It's a performance tour.
Yeah. The missionary has to visit 30 different supporting churches in 6 weeks. They're living out of a suitcase, they're exhausted, and they're constantly performing. The Antioch model seems so much more grounded.
Because it's centered on close, genuine relationship. And that brings us to the book of Philippians. Antioch was their sending church, but Philippi was a key supporting church. And Paul's relationship with them gives us the theology of partnership.
In Philippians chapter 1, Paul calls it a fellowship in the gospel.
The Greek word there is koinonia. It implies joint participation. This is not a transaction. Paul isn't selling a service that the Philippians are buying. They are full partners in the enterprise.
And that partnership included financial support. But Paul frames that support in a really interesting way, especially in Philippians 4. He doesn't call it a salary or a payment.
No, he uses worship language. He calls their gift a fragrant offering, a sacrifice acceptable and pleasing to God.
That changes how we should view the offering plate, doesn't it?
Completely. When a church member gives money to missions, they are not just paying a bill or keeping the lights on in a jungle clinic. They are engaging in an act of worship. It's a spiritual sacrifice offered to God.
In the communication, it went both ways. Paul shared his trials. He's very open about being in prison.
But he always frames it through the lens of the advancement of the gospel. He says, what has happened to me has really served to advance the gospel.
So it's honest reporting, but it's theologically grounded reporting.
Yes, and because of that honesty, the Philippians could pray intelligently. They weren't just praying, God bless Paul. They were praying for his specific situation, for his boldness, for his guards.
And the source argues that no agency, no matter how good they are, can replace those kinds of personal connections.
An agency representative can visit your church once a year, but they're not your family. The church is your family. The missionary on the field needs to know that people back home are praying for their specific headache, for their specific difficult neighbor, for that specific bout of discouragement they're feeling this week.
That emotional and spiritual tether, that rope, is what keeps them on the field.
Without it, they're just drifting, and drifting is incredibly dangerous in this line of work.
Well, inevitably, In any line of work, things go wrong, or at least things change. And that leads us to Acts chapter 15. The source material brings this up under the heading of reevaluation and strategy.
Right, because the dream team of Paul and Barnabas, they split up.
And it wasn't a friendly split.
No, the text says it was a sharp contention. It was over a personnel issue. John Mark?
What was the issue with him?
He had abandoned them on the first trip. And Barnabas, whose name means son of encouragement, wants to give the young man a second chance.
And Paul.
Paul, the laser-focused apostle, basically says absolutely not. He's a liability. He's not reliable.
It's almost comforting in a way to know that even the apostles had HR issues.
It is. But look at what happens next. The church is right there in the middle of it. The text says that after the split, Paul chose Silas, and then he departed, having been commended by the brothers to the grace of the Lord.
There's that commissioning again. The laying on of hands, the sending.
Yes. The team changed. The strategy shifted. Now 2 teams were going out instead of just 1. But the church was the stabilizing force through it all. They handled this fork in the road, and they recommissioned Paul for the next phase of the work.
The application here for us today seems vital. Missionaries on the field, they face massive strategic shifts all the time.
Constantly. The government closes a door, a teammate gets sick and has to leave permanently. A visa is denied.
And the source argues that the missionary should not be making these massive pivots in a vacuum.
Right. They shouldn't be out there just cowboying it. Well, I guess I'll just pack up and move to this other city and try starting a business. No. You were sent by a body, and that body needs to be involved in the council.
They hold the authority.
They hold the authority. If the strategy has to change, the sending church needs to weigh in, they need to approve, and they need to recommit the missionary to the grace of God for that new work.
It protects the missionary from their own blind spots, doesn't it?
It does, and it protects the church from continuing to support a mission that has drifted from its original purpose.
So we've covered the mandate to send, the tether of connection, and this need for reevaluation. Now I want to move to a short but really effective letter that I think often gets overlooked in missions discussions, and that's the 3 John.
Ah, yes. Our source material really leans into the example of a man named Gaius.
3 John is just a gem for this whole topic. The letter is written to this man, Gaius, who was a church leader, and John is commending him for his hospitality.
But not just for having his friends over for dinner, he was hosting strangers, which in this context meant itinerant missionaries who were traveling through his area.
And the standard that John sets for this hospitality is just incredible. It's in verse 6. You will do well to send them on their way in a manner worthy of God.
Let's just pause on that phrase for a second. Worthy of God. That is the standard of care.
What does that actually mean, practically speaking?
Well, the authors argue it means treating the missionary as you would treat the Lord Jesus himself. It brings to mind Matthew 25. What you did to the least of these, my brothers, you did to me.
Okay.
But it goes even further. It means providing the best, not the leftovers, not the cast-offs.
So not, here are some old clothes from the church lost and found, and here's a can of beans from the back of the pantry.
Not exactly. In a manner worthy of God implies high-quality support, nutritious food, safe lodging, sufficient funds so they can get to the next leg of their trip without worrying. It is a call to generosity that maybe hurts a little bit. It's a call to excellence in our support.
And John gives the motivation for this high standard in the very next verse, verse 7. For they went out for the sake of the name.
The name of Christ. That is the reason they are out there. They are not out there for adventure or for tourism. They are out there for the glory of the king.
So because they're on the king's business?
They should be treated with the dignity of the king's ambassadors.
Then there's this really interesting negative constraint that John adds right after that. He says they are taking nothing from the Gentiles.
This is fascinating, and it's crucial for us. The Gentiles here refers to unbelievers, the pagan world. The early church had a clear policy. We do not solicit funds from the world to do God's work.
Why not? What's the reasoning behind that?
Because it honors the name. If God's people cannot or will not support God's work, and we have to go begging to the world for help, what does that say about our God?
It implies he's insufficient.
It implies he's insufficient, or that his own people don't actually care about his glory.
That is a heavy thought. So the church has the exclusive duty to fund the work.
Yes. And the implication is, if we fail to support them adequately, we are effectively forcing them to look to the Gentiles, or today, maybe to government grants, or secular jobs that distract them from ministry and that dishonors the name.
But the flip side of that is glorious, verse 8. Therefore, we ought to support such men, so that we may be fellow workers with the truth.
Fellow workers. The Greek is synergos. We get our word synergy from it.
So even if you stay home, even if you never leave your hometown,
By supporting them in a manner worthy of God, you become an active participant in the advance of the truth. You are swinging the hammer just as much as they are. You are holding the rope.
that connects all this theology right back to the person sitting in the pew. It dignifies the role of the sender.
It does. It completely removes any idea of a second-class citizen status for those who stay in support.
Okay, so we have established the biblical necessity of all this. The church must send, must hold the rope, must steer through the changes, and must support in a manner worthy of God. Now let's get practical. How do we actually do this?
Right, this is where the rubber meets the road.
We're turning now to Tom Pennington's work, Supporting Your Church's Missionaries. And he breaks this down by role. The elders, the pastors in the congregation.
It's one thing to agree with the theology. It's a whole other thing to clear your calendar and actually do the work.
Let's start at the top, with the elders. Pennington lists 6 specific ways that elders must engage. The first one is simple, but I think it's often neglected. It's counsel.
Just be available. Missionaries face incredibly complicated ethical and strategic dilemmas. Should we bribe this official to get our visa? How do we handle the issue of polygamy among new converts? These are heavy, heavy questions.
And they need wise counselors.
They do. But often missionaries are afraid to even ask these questions because they fear if they share a struggle, the church will pull their support.
Oh, he's struggling, maybe he's not cut out for this mentality.
It's a toxic culture and it's deadly. Elders need to create a safe space where a missionary can call them and say, I am drowning, and the immediate response is, we are with you, not we are firing you.
The second point from Pennington is visit. Get on a plane and go to the field.
And this is not a vacation. This is not mission tourism for the leadership. Elders need to go to see the reality on the ground. They need to smell the air. They need to feel the spiritual oppression.
They need to see that the missionary's apartment has mold, or that the traffic is maddening.
Yes, you cannot pray with real empathy if you have not seen the context. And when an elder visits, it validates the ministry to the missionary in a huge way. It says, you are so central to our church's work that we will travel halfway around the world just to be with you and encourage you.
And then that elder can come back and report to the church with firsthand authority and passion.
That's right. The third point is encourage engagement. This means the elders have to mobilize the whole congregation.
They have to be the cheerleaders for missions.
They do. They're constantly pointing the congregation to the missionaries. They are setting up the practical structures for care, which we'll talk about in a minute, like care teams. It's their job to keep it on the front burner.
Fourth, pray. And not just a generic, God bless the missionaries at the end of a service.
No. Pennington references Spurgeon here. Spurgeon used to pray that God would pour out on this church a missionary spirit. Elders need to model this kind of specific, passionate public prayer.
Because if the elders never pray for the nations from the pulpit,
the people will not pray for the nations in their prayer closets. It signals what is actually crucial to the life of the church.
Number 5 from Pennington is platform.
Give them the microphone. When they are home on assignment, let them speak. And not just for 5 minutes at the end of the service. Give them the pulpit during the Sunday school hour or even the main service.
And with technology today?
There's no excuse. We have Zoom, we have video calls. There is no reason for a missionary to be out of sight, out of mind.
Okay, the 6th one for elders, and I think this has a distinctly reformed flavor to it, philosophy. The elders must emphasize faithfulness over results.
This is so critical. The American business model that has crept into the church is all about ROI, return on investment. We gave you $50,000 last year, so how many baptisms did we get for that?
That just crushes a missionary's spirit.
It does, especially those who are working in hard soil like the Middle East or post-Christian Europe. It's a produce or perish mentality.
But the biblical standard is different.
The biblical standard is faithfulness. Paul says it is required of stewards that they be found faithful. God is the one who gives the increase. Our job is to plant and water. Elders need to protect their missionaries from the pressure to inflate numbers or to pursue shallow, decision-based ministry.
They need to be the ones saying, we support you because you are faithfully preaching the gospel, not because you posted a high baptism count on Instagram.
And that is incredibly liberating for a worker on the field, to know that their value to the church is not tied to a metric. It allows them to focus on deep, long-term discipleship.
Oh, okay, so that's the elders. Pennington then singles out the lead pastor. Why is he separated out?
Because the lead pastor is the primary voice. He steers the ship. If he is indifferent or silent about missions, the church will be indifferent. Pennington says he must be the one building personal relationships with the missionaries.
And he should be the one visiting.
Yes. When the senior pastor gets on a plane and goes to the field, it sends a massive signal to the whole congregation. This work matters. This is a priority for us.
And of course, his pulpit ministry is key.
It is. He needs to preach the Great Commission. But more than that, he needs to connect God's heart for the nations into his regular week-in, week-out exposition of the scriptures.
So you don't have to wait for the annual Mission Sunday.
Not at all. If you're preaching through Romans or the Psalms or Genesis, the nations are everywhere in the text. Point them out to your people.
All right, finally, let's talk about the missions leadership team, MLT, and the members of the church. Because not everyone is an elder or a pastor. What does the average person in the pew do to hold the rope?
This is where Pennington suggests care teams, and this is just a brilliant practical tool.
So how does that work?
A small group of people in the church is assigned to one specific missionary family or unit, and they are responsible for their practical logistical care.
So things like sending birthday packages.
Yes, but it goes deeper. Maybe the missionary owns a house back in the States, and while they're gone, the water heater breaks. The care team handles getting the plumber over there. They take care of it so the missionary doesn't have to stress about it from 5,000 miles away.
That's huge. That's a massive burden lifted.
It is. It's practical love in action. Then, alongside that, you have prayer teams. These are members who have committed to daily informed prayer for that specific worker. They get the real-time updates, the urgent requests,
And of course, giving.
regular, faithful financial support. Pennington frames it as a duty of every believer. It's not charity, it's participation in the work.
The last point here is short-term ministry. Short-term trips often get a bad rap. People call it mission tourism.
And they can be bad. They can be a net negative for the long-term worker if they're not done well.
So what's the key to doing them right?
They must be done under the authority of the elders, and their entire purpose must be to support and advance the goals of the long-term work already happening. When they're done that way, they're invaluable.
Yes.
Well, they can provide real aid to the work on the ground. But just as much, they infect the person who goes with a vision for the world. A huge number of long-term missionaries started out as short-termers.
So we've built this entire structure. We have the theological foundation from Acts. We have the practical scaffolding from Pennington.
And it all points back to that one idea, the integral link.
Yeah.
The church and the missionary are inseparable. From the selection process in Acts 13 to the reporting back in Acts 14 through the conflict resolution in Acts 15, all the way to the ongoing care we see in 3 John. You simply cannot have one without the other.
And we have to keep coming back to that distinction we made at the beginning. Agencies are tools. They can be good tools. But the church is the body.
It's like parenting. You don't hand your children off to a daycare center and then never see them again. You might use a school to help educate them, but you are the parent. The church is the parent of the missionary.
That's a powerful analogy. And in many ways, we've been guilty of a kind of spiritual child neglect. We've handed them off.
It's time to take them back. It's time to re-engage and hold the rope.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I just want to challenge you, the person listening right now. Where is your church in this picture? Is your church actively holding the rope? Or is your rope lying on the ground next to the mine while you assume someone else has it?
It's a sobering question, and it applies to every single one of us. The Great Commission is not an optional extra for super Christians. You either go or you send. And sending is not just writing a check once a year. It's sending in a manner worthy of God.
Here is a thought to leave you with, something to mull over. We talked about 3 John and that command not to take anything from the Gentiles, from the world.
Right.
If our churches fail to step up, if we are stingy or distracted or just plain disorganized, and our missionaries are forced to come home early, or worse, forced to look for support from secular sources to stay on the field, are we not responsible for dimming the glory of the very name they went out to proclaim?
We are. Absolutely. If they go out for the sake of the name, we must support them for the sake of the name. Anything less is unworthy of our King.
Thank you for joining us on Reformed Thinking. May we be a people who hold the rope tight until the work is done.
Amen to that.